Welcome to another edition of Geopolitics and Empire. A reminder that your support is crucial. The best way to support the broadcast is by becoming a paid subscriber on the Substack, $5 or more a month, or $50 or more per year. Founding members who give $150 or more, I throw in a free consult with them so you can chat with me. And I think at some point in the future, I will be increasing the paid subscriber fee, but anyone who is already a subscriber will be able to keep that same price. And we do private weekly chats to discuss current events with subscribers. You can also buy me a coffee, donor box, subscribe star, locals, crypto, all of that stuff, because I'm banned in other places like PayPal by the Department of Homeland Security. You can purchase a consultation to chat with me, and do check out my affiliates, Legal Shield, Wise Wolf Gold, Above Phone, easydns.com for hosting and domains. You can use the coupon code Geopolitics to get 15% off, and do leave a podcast review on Apple, Spotify, and wherever you listen to the broadcast. Returning is Vietnam veteran, author, investor, all-around Renaissance man, Bob Moriarty of 321gold.com. How is life, Bob?
Well, other than the fact that we just don't have a single thing that we can talk about because it's so boring. So I have brought the tide tables, and instead of talking about geopolitics, I'll read the tide tables so everyone can know when to go fish.
Well, speaking of reading, I finally did it, Bob. You're going to like this. I finally did it. I got the No Guts, No Glory, your book here, The Glory Days of International Aircraft Deliveries. And I've just read a few snippets, and I'm finding fascinating these stories. And just on that note, though, any thoughts about the book? And just going back to starting with the globalism and Great Reset stuff, I've been reading stuff like last week, Lufthansa, they're going to add a 72 euro surcharge for climate change, so the serfs and plebes can't afford to fly, and they're cutting flights in different parts of Europe. So any thoughts on the airline industry these days?
It's like everything else going on today. It is total insanity. And you look at it and say, could people be that crazy? And in fact, they are.
They're pushing us. We'll see how far they can push us. And you've talked about Black Swans the last time that we were on. One, I guess, a good piece of news. Before getting into the not fun stuff, but Julian Assange has been set free. Any thoughts on that?
That was the most amazing story. There was a lot of information that came out last week about James Clapper. And I think his title was the head of national intelligence. I think he was the head of all of the intelligence agencies. And as it turns out, there was something in the Julian Assange agreement with the DOJ that everybody seemed to have missed. Now, do you remember when the Democratic National Party was hacked? All their emails were hacked.
Yeah, I read something recently that part of the deal with Assange was that they were forced to take down from WikiLeaks the DNC stuff. Yeah,
okay, now, one of the things that I try to make the point in the books and on interviews is you have to ask the right question. If you don't ask the right question, you're not going to get the right answer. Now, Julian Assange was locked up for 12 years, essentially because he committed the crime of journalism. The amazing thing to me was the New York Times, all of the newspapers in the world failed to support him. There were newspapers that published the same information that he published, and no one was charged with a crime. But he was charged with a crime. So after 12 years, the Australians finally pushed the United States to release him. But what's really interesting, as part of the agreement, was the Department of Justice insisted that Julian Assange erased all of the DNC emails. And the question, of course, that people should be asking is, why does the DOJ care about the Democrat National Committee emails? And the answer has to be because there would have been something totally illegal, and the Department of Justice wants to cover it up for the Democratic National Committee. But a lot of stuff came out about Clapper, and Clapper was arm in arm with the Obama administration in setting up the Russian collusion nonsense, which Obama was behind and supported, and the 51 intelligence professionals who claimed that it had the hallmarks of Russian disinformation knew that the laptop, the Hunter Biden laptop, was perfectly valid. So this amazing confession, as it were, that all of the things that Trump was claiming before and after the 2020 election, all of them were true. Now, one of the things that I've said, and I know I've said it to you, is that you know that if you want to find out what's really going on, you've got to listen to the mainstream media and understand they're lying all the time. If you watched even the clips from the debate last week, the most interesting thing to me was not the fact that Joe Biden clearly was senile. It was the reaction of the mainstream media that's been covering up for him for years. I mean, anybody who had eyes could see that he was senile and he wasn't compos mentis. And they let him, they pretended he knew what was going on for years. And then after the debate, they discovered, oh my God, Joe Biden's senile. Okay. The New York Times came out and said, you need to resign now. And I'm thinking, where have you guys been? We knew that years ago. And I can't think of anyone in the mainstream media who came out 2 years ago or 3 years ago or 4 years ago when it was obvious it said this man is not qualified mentally to be president of the United States. So if you question my statement that the mainstream media is always lying, all you have to do is look at how the mainstream media behaved last week.
Yeah, as you say, it's incredible. Like all of us, the populace, it's the Orwellian quote. I forget. Just don't believe what you see. Right. So we've known this for 5-10 years, and then finally they admit it. So what's the game here? I'm done sort of with voting. I didn't watch the debates. I saw a snippet of RFK Jr. was kicked out, not allowed, and for all his faults, I think he's the most lucid of the trio. And I think he'd be bringing up. Yes, I know with his whole issue with the Israel war, but still, he goes further on the deep state and different elements of that. And I think that's one reason they wanted to keep RFK Jr. Out. And since we're on the topic of America, I did want to ask. It's a total clown show. Any other thoughts on the state of America these days? Anything that we haven't already said, because we've touched on this so many times, and it just seems to be continuing on its descent. The United States. Any other thoughts there?
Well, one more thought about Biden, and I did send you a clip. People who are sophisticated and well-educated know that many world leaders have body doubles. Okay, if you go back to the days of kings and queens, they had food tasters. They wanted these guys to taste the food first, and if they keeled over and died, they didn't eat the shrimp. Uh, many people in power have body doubles. Whoever allowed Joe Biden, the real Joe Biden, to get up on stage and have 90 minutes of debate, that was adult abuse, elderly abuse. But the very next day, the supposed Joe Biden was very energetic and he was lucid and he was loud. But there were a lot of pictures. When you looked at the pictures, you could see that whoever the fake Joe Biden was wearing a mask. And they make this mistake sometimes. I've seen a picture of Zelensky, and Zelensky walks down some stairs, and 30 seconds after him, another Zelensky walks down the stairs. So it's not hidden that government leaders have body doubles, but there is a Joe Biden body double. And I just wonder why they didn't have the body double do the debate. I think Joe Biden was set up, and I think they're going to try to force him off the ticket. And I've said many times there is no way Joe Biden is going to be running for president this year.
And I don't doubt, what you say. I think this sort of stuff goes on with body doubles. The only problem, it's nearly impossible to verify that unless someone runs up and rips the mask off. And there is that different dynamic, as you mentioned, on related to Biden's performance from one day to the next. And I heard rumors of who they might replace Biden with, and oh boy, Gavin, American Psycho Newsom, and I call her Wretched, Gretchen, Wretched, false flag Whitmer from Michigan, the governor who ran the FBI false flag op to kidnap herself. Apparently, this is a popular tactic today down in, was it Bolivia? I think they're saying the coup there was self-staged by the people of Bolivia are saying. I saw that clip. They're saying he staged the coup himself because he's not popular with the people, and that's the classic way to raise popularity. And so, oh boy, I can't imagine gruesome Newsom and Wretched Whitmer. I'm going to move to Mexico if that happens. Just kidding, I already did. And so, any thought on that? And then our favorite topic, war. War is coming. You've been saying it for so long. I've been saying it for a long time, and it's just all roads seem to point to war. They're bringing in the conscription. I'm sure you saw Rishi Sunak in the UK saying, "Look, if you Brits don't, if we conscript you and you don't want to fight, we're gonna cancel your driver's license. We're gonna freeze your bank account." It's like COVID was a dry run for World War III. Absolute insanity. Your thoughts?
Let's talk about the potential candidates for the Democrats. Without exception, they're goofy people. And strange enough, RFK Jr. is probably closer. RFK Jr. is probably the only Democrat who could be elected. And strange enough, I think that Donald Trump will select him as vice president. I'm not in favor of Trump or RFK Jr. because they are owned and operated by Israel. But when you look at the rest of them, how on earth could Gavin Newsom survive a recall vote? The man is an idiot. He has destroyed Los Angeles. He destroyed San Francisco. If you steal $950 or less, you're not charged with the crime. I mean, would there be a more effective way of saying steal? It's okay. And of course, people are doing that. So you walk into a Walmart and they've got toothbrushes locked up in cages. And I'm thinking something wrong with the society. But let's talk about, I think it was the G7, or perhaps it could have been the so-called peace conference. Biden was there. It would have been the G7. They're going to have a group photo, and they get the G7 together, and Biden walks off. And the head of Italy had to chase him down and grab him by the arm and say, wait a minute, we're taking a photograph over here. And you just have to wonder, what do these guys think? Okay. They get to see him up close and personal. The head of the DOJ has made the recordings of the investigation of Biden, the audio. He's made a crypto secret because he doesn't want anyone hearing what Biden sounded like when he was being interviewed, because, of course, he would have been totally off the wall. But let's go back to war. War's always fun to talk about. I'm going to read you a quote. All Palestinian prisoners to be executed and shot in the head.
What's this? I haven't followed lately the Israel-Gaza news, but what's going on there?
The Minister of National Security of Israel, Ben-Gvir. What? Wait a minute. Wouldn't that be cold-blooded murder? Yeah, but that's our program. So we've got an interesting situation. We've got four. I've been calling it 4.5 wars, but I think I'm going to change that. I think we're going to go up to 4.75 war. We've got the obvious war in Ukraine, and even Zelensky is starting to admit, oh, by the way, we've had 1 million Ukrainian soldiers killed. We're running out of people. Maybe we should talk about peace. Russia's been talking about peace since 3 months before the war, and Zelensky's waking up to the facts he doesn't have any more war bodies that he could throw into the battle. As much as NATO and the United States would like to continue attacking Russia, one of these days they're going to cross a red line that would be a giant mistake. They're pushing the Russians too hard, and I can assure you the generals in Russia are pushing Putin for a real reaction. But that's not the danger point. There is the obvious genocide going on in Gaza, and it's clear now after 9 months that all of the objectives of Israel have been defeated. The only thing they've succeeded in doing is massacring tens of thousands of people and destroying Gaza. But the real danger point is Lebanon and Hezbollah. Nobody in the West is aware of this, but when Israel invaded Lebanon in 2006, Hezbollah literally threw them out of the country. And of course, the mainstream media, because they don't ever tell the truth, did not report that in the West. But Hezbollah is armed with somewhere between 100,000 and 150,000 rockets and missiles. And if they want to level Israel, they can do that. Now, my belief is the problem with Israel is this belief that they are the chosen people. The guy walks up to you on the street and says, I'm part of the chosen people. And we are so special, and God loves us so much that my fingernail is worth 1,000 of your lives. You would think this guy is not dealing with the full deck. And I had someone write me several months ago who took offense at the fact Americans, of course, are not allowed to criticize Israel. You can criticize the Pope, you can criticize Biden, you can criticize Trump, you can criticize the Chinese, you can criticize the Japanese, you can criticize Mormons, you can criticize Baptists. The one group you cannot criticize is Israel. And he was telling me how superior the Jewish people were. And I said, well, do me a favor, cut your fingernail and put it up on eBay and tell me what you get for it, because I think the rest of the world would put the same value on that fingernail that I would, which is nothing. But when you've been told your whole life you're special, you're God's chosen people, you cannot do any wrong, you start thinking you can attack anybody and get away with it because God is on your side. God is only on the side of the people who have the best munitions and the best leadership. World War I, the English thought God was on their side. Germans thought God was on their side. The Russians thought God was on their side. And actually, they were all wrong. If Israel attacks Lebanon, Hezbollah is going to launch tens of thousands of rockets and missiles in Israel. I think the chances of Israel attacking Lebanon are very high. I think that Israel intends to use nuclear weapons. If they do, the first nuclear weapon will be set off by Israel, and the second nuclear weapon will be set off by Russia. Russia knows who is behind the carnage in the Middle East. And frankly, it's so simple. It's Israel. Israel and the United States exist for war. If they attack Hezbollah, even with nuclear weapons, because they would love to nuke Damascus, and they would love to nuke Tehran, and they would love to nuke Lebanon. It will go nuclear. It will go totally out of control. The Turks will get involved. The Turks would go after Cyprus. Cyprus is a joint use island. There's a Turkish side and a Greek side. And the Turks would drag the Greeks into it. Iran would get involved. Syria would get involved. Turkey would be involved, obviously. Egypt has forces right on the border with Gaza right now. So we are literally, it has gotten more dangerous every single day. And there are very few adults in the room. The only people that I'm aware of who are actually talking peace are Putin, Lavrov, and the Chinese.
Yeah, and I saw what you mentioned. Governments like Canada and Saudi Arabia were telling their citizens to leave Lebanon immediately. And I'm trying to find this other post that I shared on my feeds. Here it is. For example, this Hans Christensen. He's a nuclear expert. He's got Trump derangement syndrome. So I kind of I removed that part, but nonetheless, he's an expert on nukes, and he says, just as a further example to add on to what you're saying, he says, U.S. nuclear ballistic missile sub arrived in Scotland, but then he goes on to say, he says potentially the USS Tennessee that last weekend surfaced off Norway is a nuclear signal to Russia. Before Russia's invasion of Crimea, again, I'm just citing him, U.S. SSBNs did not visit foreign ports. So you're seeing all kinds of these, signals where we just keep pushing further and further into the abyss. And, and any other thoughts on how this would play out, the scenario that you just put out there? I could see it happening. It seems like they're preparing for war.
Well, certainly they're preparing. The Germans have talked about draft The Poles have talked about draft. The English have talked about drafts. The Americans have talked about drafts, including drafting women. Now, Jim Rickards, who is loosely associated with the military-industrial complex, and it's the military-industrial complex and the Zionists who are behind all this talk of war, they believe that a war is a good thing and it's survivable. Russia had a nationwide test of their self-defense system, and they required every single person to go into a shelter. There is no such program in the United States or the UK or Canada. Russia has anti-ballistic missiles, and they have at least some ability to defeat missiles. The United States has none whatsoever. Jim Rickards has participated in multiple war games that showed the U.S. and NATO against Russia, and 100% of the cases, it went nuclear. Now, someone I did an interview a couple of days ago. Can you look over my shoulder and see what's on the shelf?
Is that toilet paper?
It's toilet paper. Okay. I have gone from having 3 months supply of emergency food to having a year's supply of emergency food. You got to eat the food anyway. So if you buy it now, it might make sense. You could save a lot of money and you could save your life. Jim Rickards said that these things all go nuclear. And frankly, with the lack of leadership, certainly in the United States, no one can even describe who's running the United States. You can have an opinion. And in my opinion, it's actually Obama. Okay, he did something that no president in history has done. When his term ended, he stayed in Washington. And the reason he stayed in Washington is because he surrounded himself with these female flunkies who he got to work in the Biden administration. So my opinion is that Obama is actually running the Biden White House. And my opinion about Israel is that Netanyahu is fighting all these wars to stay out of jail. So we could have World War III based on some really stupid actions. And this comment by the Minister of National Security of Israel, threatening genocide is a war crime. It's not an opinion of a war crime. It is a war crime. And you will never see a more clear example of genocide other than what's going on in Gaza today. And anyone who supports that needs to go down to Walmart and they need to buy a new moral compass because their old one is broken.
Yeah, and just some of the other stuff I'm reading about Israel, and NPR put out a piece saying Israel's Iron Dome could, is under threat, and then Naftali Bennett is tweeting out. Seems like he's freaking out. He's worried about Israelis leaving the country. He's tweeting. He tweeted out. He said, "Do not leave the country." One thing worries me in particular. It talks about leaving the country. He's talking to all these Israeli professionals who are leaving Israel, and just on the war aspect. I had a conversation with my kid this morning, and we have Mexican military planes that fly over us almost on a daily basis, and she was afraid. And we'd even seen a fighter jet. It may have been an American fighter jet doing a visit. This was many months back. Very loud. You can feel almost the house shaking. And she asked about war, and I told her, don't. She knew about the bombs. She's like, the jets have bombs, and I said, look, there's no war here, so they won't be dropping bombs here. And she gave me a thumbs up, like she understood. War is far away in other parts of the world. We have other security issues to deal with, but I don't think we'll be seeing war here in Mexico. One of your clips from our past interview that I posted on Twitter X that went viral, that was seen hundreds of thousands of times, George Galloway retweeted, was the reason for this war. You talked in that clip about East versus West, why they're doing this. A lot of my guests say it's to wipe out the debt, to have a reset, as is done with every war. We're seeing now this restructuring of the global system, right? Supply chains, nearshoring, energy, economy, Russia, China, Iran, the West. You've got these dealings now with India, Iran, and Russia, and all these different changes, these digital currencies, and this bifurcation, basically. So thoughts on the war being used to wipe out the debt of the West, and then sort of the new system as you see it coming to be.
Well, the interesting thing about that, and I will have something a lot of people will disagree with, the leaders of the West are far too stupid, okay, to start a war to end the debt. Now, yes, the war will end the debt, but they are too stupid to understand that. They think that starting a war is going to make the military-industrial complex even richer. I am astounded at CNBC and CNN and even Fox bringing on these former military people talking about how wonderful it is to support Ukraine. Now, prior to the Russians coming into Ukraine, the world understood that Ukraine was the most corrupt nation in Europe. What's really happening is a lot of people around the world, including France right now. Okay, we had an election yesterday, and Macron and his party were soundly defeated. The actions of NATO, the actions of Europe, the actions of the United States, the actions of Canada and Australia and New Zealand, people are resisting. And what it's doing is forcing this divide between the debt-based system of the West, which is obviously collapsing. And how many people in the media are willing to admit it? How many people of these military so-called experts are willing to admit we're bankrupting the United States to support the most corrupt country in Europe? Some of the things that they are doing are so stupid. I'll give you an example. The best example that I could possibly give you of having dollars doesn't mean the same thing as having cents. Bill Gates is buying timberland. Do you know what he intends to do with it?
No, I hadn't.
Yes,
I hadn't heard that. What's he gonna do with the wood?
He's going to cut the trees down.
Oh, right, to save from us global warming. Yeah, block out the sun and cut the trees. Okay, makes perfect sense.
Now, here's what's beautiful. He's going to cut the fucking trees down. Okay, and he's going to bury the trees, and of course, it's going to take a lot of diesel fuel to do that. And his theory is that will reduce the production of CO2. But there is this circle, okay? What kind of plants produce CO2?
Well, particularly trees, no.
No.
Or humans, or
trees don't produce CO2.
Or they take it in, but
trees
we produce CO2, don't we?
Trees consume CO2, and what do they produce? They produce oxygen. So all the oxygen we're breathing came from trees. And Bill Gates wants to bury the trees to eliminate the CO2 problem, but the trees are the ones who get rid of the CO2. And I'm thinking, how can you have that much money and not have one person on your staff with an IQ of over 105 to tell you, Bill, your theory about these trees producing CO2, they don't actually produce CO2. They actually consume CO2. And I could see Bill Gates going, no shit, really? We are governed by fools. So there is the conflict between the debt-based system of the West and the resource-based system of the East. And it's amazing. They had a meeting of the BRICS, and they've got 30 more people that want to sign up for the BRICS. And there will be more and more and more. And what they're doing is they're saying, we do not want to be part of the debt-based system. It's failing, and we know it's failing. And of course, the non-BRICS, the West, continues on the suicide path that's going to destroy Israel. It's going to destroy Europe. It's going to destroy the United States. This bullshit of having draft. The next war is going to last for 72 minutes. Okay, you can't draft people in 72 minutes. It takes hours just to put them in uniform. So if we cross that line, and I think the probability of crossing that line is extremely high. We didn't even talk about the other two wars. The Hutus are now to the point they're sinking ships. They have stopped Israel's economy, and nobody wants to ship through the Red Sea and parts of the Mediterranean anymore. These guys in turbans and sandals have defeated the two most powerful militaries in the world. And of course, we've got the 3.5 war between Taiwan and China. And should Israel-Lebanon heat up, it would be an ideal time for China to readmit Taiwan. And of course, the United States, and again, that's something that the military-industrial complex, the mainstream media doesn't say. The official position of the United States is Taiwan is part of China. And sooner or later, the head of China is going to sit down with the head of Taiwan and say, look, I mean, we don't really need to kill each other. Okay, you are part of us. You're going to remain part of us. Why don't we do this in a friendly way? When people realize that the head of the United States, the most powerful and the most dangerous country in the world, is senile and past it, and they think about the implications of that, I'm totally astonished by the lack of leadership in Europe. Macron's running around saying, I'm going to send troops to Ukraine. And the French voters just said, no, you're not. Okay, that ain't going to happen. You're going to see a lot more of that in the future. There is a counter-revolution going on within Europe, and they're starting to demand real leadership, of which there's very little.
Yeah, in the Western world, we're all asking ourselves, who's going to fight these wars? Like, I'm happy to have my driver's license canceled and my bank account frozen. I'm not going to go die for these freak, satanic clowns who serve the oligarchy. Sunak and all these people are just the clown puppets. And what you mentioned with the Houthis, I shared this on my feeds some days ago from CBS News or 60 Minutes, where they interviewed a Navy Vice Admiral Brad Cooper, who said the Houthis are the first entity in the history of the world to use anti-ship ballistic missiles ever. So again, as to what you're saying, the hour is getting late. We're seeing a lot of firsts, and just one more example of the absolute clown show of the West and its politicians. Annalena Charlotte, or should I say Frau Annalena Charlotte Alma Baerbock, Germany's Minister for Foreign Affairs. One of my posts that I posted about her just went viral on LinkedIn. It's a clip in German where she's being interviewed, where she admits to using something to the tune of 136,000 euros of taxpayers' money for her makeup. Like totally 136,000 euros just for her makeup of taxpayer money. It's just you can my reaction to that was you can't put lipstick on a globalist pig, Bob.
I think you're being terribly unfair.
Oh yeah,
I think it's a horrible thing to say. I spent a lot more money than that on makeup, and you don't insult me to my face. But she came up with the best quote. I love people in the West talking about democracy. Okay, first of all, my definition of democracy is two wolves and a sheep arguing over what to have for lunch. That's democracy. Democracy is mob rule. But she was talked about resistance from the German people to giving more money to Ukraine when they know Ukraine is corrupt. And she said, I don't care what the voters say. We're going to send money to Ukraine anyway. And I thought, God, we finally got an honest politician who says, I don't give a shit what the voters say. I was absolutely amazed. And quite bluntly, I'd love to know what she paid 136,000 euros for, but she's not as bad as Ursula von der Leyen. Okay. Ursula von der Leyen did a deal with Pfizer on COVID shots, and she ordered something like 6 or 8 COVID shots per resident in the EU. And she paid some absurd, literally billions and billions of dollars for this. And her opposition party came out and said, well, we would like to see the records of those negotiations. And she said, well, it was all on my phone and I deleted it. And I thought, oh, God, no corruption there.
The same thing happened with Boris Johnson, and they've been trying to pass this chat control in the EU where they would be able to destroy the encryption and then read all of our messaging on Signal, Telegram, WhatsApp, and our personal emails. But then they put an exemption for themselves. I mean, total, absolute insanity. That's been pushed back for now. I don't even know how they would be able to implement it, though. If there are ways you can get around that, I guess, using VPN and stuff. But I mean, it's total dystopia. And the thoughts on the economy, I defer to you on that. I'm not an expert on the financial sector, but there's stuff going on I've been seeing in Japan with them trying to control the collapse of their, I think, currency, and then I guess sell off, dollars. And so gold, silver, the status of the dollar. What's interesting for you when it comes to the?
Let me go into that, but let's talk. You just raised a really important point. How many people in the New Zealand government did not have to obey the New Zealand rules about COVID shots?
Didn't they crack down pretty hard on New Zealand?
They did. Okay, they went just as full Nazi as Australia did. 10,000 people in their government were given a pass and didn't have to take the shot. I mean, the stuff that's coming out now is so outrageous. And some of it, I mean, just today, the U.S. Supreme Court said that presidents have no liability for official acts. There are so many interesting things. We don't know what's going to happen with the Democrats, but obviously something's going to happen with the Democrats. The totally corrupt judge in the New York case against Trump, he comes up for sentencing on July 11th. And personally, I think the guy is going to go all in. And I think he's going to sentence Trump to jail. Okay. Now, from a legal case, that's the most bogus case in American history. It's going to get overturned by the state and it's going to get overturned by the Supreme Court. It was total fraud from the get-go. But the judge now has Trump's freedom in his hands. And I'll go you one better. Let's presume the Democrats are just as stupid as we think they're going to, and they come up with one of these half dozen idiots and put him in as the presidential candidate. If it looks like Trump's going to win the election, they're going to shoot him.
That's what my recent guest, Dr. Polka Roberts, former assistant secretary.
Absolutely.
That's what he said.
They will kill Trump. What I have enjoyed the most from these clowns who are traitors to the United States, traitors to the Constitution, and all these games they play with Trump. Now, I am not a Trumper. Okay, I don't particularly like Trump. Most people don't know this, but Donald Trump is an opera singer. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know he was an opera singer.
Yeah. And next time you hear Donald Trump at a speech, all you have to do is listen. And he goes, me, 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 me. He's an opera singer and he's practicing, and he's a really good opera singer. Presidential candidate, I'm not sure. But if it looks like he's going to win, they will shoot him. Now, let's go to the really fun thing. Nvidia. And I'm hoping you put your life savings in Nvidia, okay, that shot up to $3.3 trillion. That's the good news. You want to know the bad news?
That's the top, no?
Actually, I did an interview 2 weeks ago, almost 2 weeks ago. And I said, it really looks to me, the chart of Nvidia looks exactly like the chart of silver in April of 2011. It is identical. It went curvilinear, it went parabolic, and it crashed. And I happen to have called the top in silver to the day, which pissed off every other newsletter writer out there. But I was talking to the person doing the interview, and I said, boy, I hate to say it, but it really looks like Nvidia is topping. And it topped right at 141. And it dropped to 116 and change in the next 4 days. That is the biggest loss of any single stock in history in the shortest period of time. Somewhere between 580 and $600 billion went to money heaven. Now, in March of 2000, the five most heavily traded stocks represented 18% of the NASDAQ. The five most heavily traded stocks today represent 27% of the NASDAQ. In every single measure that you can find, the stock market is so overbought, overblown. And one of these days, and actually I think it's already happened, one of these days we're going to see a top and a major crash. And we don't see it this week or this month. We're going to see it soon. This is going to be a really exciting year. We've got Israel doing everything in its power to commit genocide and getting away with it. We've got Israel doing everything in their power to start World War III and getting away with it. We've got the United States and NATO continuing to attack Russia. And one of these days, Russia is going to say turnabout is fair play. And quite bluntly, they've got hypersonic missiles in Cuba. Okay. If the United States thinks sending their submarine is a threat to Russia, there's a Russian submarine 90 miles off the coast. Quite bluntly, the Russians have 100 megaton nuclear torpedoes off the East Coast, the Russians could destroy the United States with one nuclear weapon. And I think pushing the Russians is the most insane thing and self-destructive thing the United States could possibly do. So between the economy crashing, the banks crashing, the stock market crashing, the dollar going down, total chaos in the election, and nuclear war, maybe the tide tables would be interesting reading.
What would be some safe havens for people? One is moving to places like Mexico or Latin America out of the way. But gold, silver, having a 1 year supply of toilet paper and food and stuff like that. Thoughts there?
Well, here's what I tell people, and there's a lot of things. I would have been a good salesman, but I never tried to be a salesman. When I was selling computers, I pointed out that the cost of buying a computer was the least important part of owning a computer, because what you spend the most time doing is your fingers on the keyboard. If your time is valuable at all, the cost of the computer is absolutely material. Likewise, what would be the difference in cost? If you went down to the store today and you bought a year's food and you put it in your backyard, what would be the difference in cost between doing that today and then buying the food over the next year?
Well, there's this clip that just went viral about some guy who, I think it was Walmart, where he just hit reorder of a food purchase from was it a year ago or 2 years ago or three, and it was like tripled in price. Like, there you go.
But if you ignored inflation, if you buy a year's food now, how would that compare with buying food over a year and ignore inflation?
I guess you save time going to the grocery store, no?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the only thing that she would do, is she would save time. Okay. You're going to eat over the next year, and you're not going to eat more just because there's a nuclear war. But the fact, in a nuclear war, most people don't die of radiation or blast. They die from starvation. If you think COVID screwed up the channels of communication and distribution, you haven't seen anything yet. I see this is a year, if we survive it, they're going to be writing about for a long time, because there are so many black swans that bad things are happening and bad things are going to happen. And we can only hope that some adult leadership will show up at some point, because we do not have it now. Quite bluntly, you mentioned gold and silver. I've got gold and silver. I've got a year's supply of toilet paper. I got a year's supply of food. And I sincerely hope we do not start a war. But if we start a war, I'm good for a year.
Yeah, and from what was that?
And then I die.
Yeah,
I have paper at the same time it's food.
I mean, putting together everything that you say and some of my other guests is just like, that's pretty much the most we can do, and we don't need to be freaking out any more than that. Have food, water, toilet paper, gold, silver. If people
let me throw one thing in, and this is interesting. How old are you?
In my early 40s, let's say.
Oh, okay, you don't qualify. I'm 77. I was 16 years old at the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And the news in the newspaper, on the 6 o'clock news, and on the radio, was the potential for nuclear war. There is nothing now, nothing. The head of Serbia came out and said, in the next 3 or 4 months, there's going to be a world war, or sooner. Well, yeah, I'd give him some credibility. Okay, he's not some goof on a chat board someplace. The Secretary General of the UN came out and said, we are faced with a catastrophe. Okay, this is the most dangerous time in world history. Now, why isn't that front page news? Why isn't that discussed? Why isn't there a peace party? Why didn't somebody come out and say, by the way, a nuclear war would really be stupid? They're talking about the draft. Are you fucking kidding? Why would you want to draft if the war is only going to last 72 minutes?
Yeah, the silence, as you say, that is what is most disconcerting, that it's complete silence. And that's another, I think, signal of how dangerous it is, that these freaks are, they don't want anyone to resist, to stop, as this train keeps on moving on. But hopefully none of this happens, Bob, and we'll be here.
Yeah, but look at the protests against Gaza. There are protests all over the world against the actions of Israel. And there is nobody anywhere saying we don't want World War III. Stop the stupid shit. And I would hope Russia and China would get on the phone to Bibi Netanyahu and say, look, we'll guarantee you don't go to jail, but should you start World War III, we're going to turn Israel into a sheet of glass. Because quite bluntly, if they don't do that, it is going to happen. I'm in this bizarre situation where I seriously hope I pick up my computer tomorrow and read the stock market's down 40%. Every bank in the world has closed. Your money's no good. And we've got a giant financial collapse. That's the only thing that was going to stop World War III. And quite bluntly, Putin is the only barrier to Armageddon.
Yeah, I don't know what to say to that. Just uncharted territory here. Fun times ahead, Black Swans. But as you said, people need to be speaking out, doing what we can. Any other thoughts? Anything we forgot to cover? Any final thought for us, Bob?
If you look at the banks, the Fed has said, I think the number is 63 banks in the United States have failed their tests. And there's something like $560 billion in losses that they haven't taken. I want you to compare that with the $580 billion that Nvidia just evaporated. We've got things going on today, and we're going to have things going on in the near future that have never happened before in history. It's going to be a very dangerous time. We need to pray, and seriously, I mean that. We need to pray some adults show up to run the world.
You on your point about the economic collapse staving off World War III, just remind me with regarding my last podcast interview with Swedish analyst Mats Nilsson, who he also kind of said what you said, that he hopes the greed of the entities that rule us, BlackRock and Vanguard, that their greed actually prevents World War III, because we know they've got their fingers in the pie all over the place, the whole private-public partnership, and that if there is a third world war, there's the danger that China, Russia, like all these countries begin to nationalize these private industries, and that would have the whole Great Reset crowd, have them losing a lot of their power. And so that kind of speaks to what you're saying, where hopefully their greed and the economic issues help stave off a third world war. And all right, well, let us know again your best places to find you, your projects. You've got your books, No Guts, No Glory. I got the physical copy here. I've got your other books on Kindle about the economy. You're over at 321gold.com. Anything else we should know?
Well, I will comment, and I'll ask you a question. Remember the competition that I talked to you about months ago, where people were voting for who was doing the best job of the interviews?
I don't recall that competition.
Come on, you do too.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember now.
The Liberty Awards, I think, maybe. I'm not sure.
Something like that. But how did you do?
Well, no, InfoWars took a lot of the InfoWars crowd took a lot of the medals. It was so yeah. Didn't win, but it was a fun time.
The strange thing is the alternative media, and quite bluntly, I think of all of the alternative media, you were absolutely right up in the top, are doing things that has never happened before in history. Individuals have more access to quality information than they ever have. Now, that doesn't mean that I believe that everything you read on the internet is valid or even true. However, when we know the mainstream media is lying 100% of the time, if the internet and the alternative media is only lying 50% of the time, that's good. Okay, that's twice as good as the mainstream media. And I think I follow you. I don't listen to every interview because, quite bluntly, I don't have the time. But you interview the broadest section of some of the most bright people that I've ever seen, and it's actually quite an honor for me to be interviewed by you. You do a really good job, and some of the things InfoWars gets a little carried away.
They do. I try to remain measured, and I always have to let people know retweet does not mean endorsement. I don't agree with all of my guests or the gospel of everything that my guests say, but I believe, as you said, it's a wide spectrum, and I think we can learn from a lot of people. I've got, for example, my next guest coming up, just confirmed today, hopefully shows up, Fadi Lama, who wrote the book Why the West Can't Win, From Bretton Woods to a Multipolar World. So as you say, trying to get a diverse perspective here from people that most people haven't heard of. And I thank you for your support as well, Bob. And hopefully we're able to have a chat that the internet cables in the ocean don't get cut and the world doesn't become radioactive. And in the meantime, people can check out your books, Robert Moriarty, 321gold.com. Be well, Bob.
Okay, and I will say, I'll plug myself just a little bit. I'm not the best writer in the world. I read some writers, and I'm so pissed because they're so much better at writing than I am that I'm offended. However, the broad range of what I write about is actually very good. I write about war. That book is about 20 years of taking small airplanes all over the world, including flying under the Eiffel Tower. I write about financial things, and I actually have written some short fiction that's very funny. I'm a very funny writer, and I'm an entertaining writer. And of course, I really need you to do a review after you finish the book.
If Amazon will let me, because not long ago they banned my review and warned me that if I don't review books the correct woke way, they'll ban me from Amazon. But I'll try. And I do remember standing under the Eiffel Tower a couple years back. We were out there in France, and I remembering your story and just imagining you flying under there. Absolutely wild. Until next time, thank you, Bob.
Okay, thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this Geopolitics and Empire podcast. The website is geopoliticsandempire.com, and I encourage you to sign up for the free email list that goes out with each podcast and every weekend with a collection of news headlines. The newsletter and website are our last lines of defense. We're being censored and deplatformed. It's nearly impossible to find Geopolitics and Empire on the Google search engine. We've been blacklisted. YouTube frequently takes down our videos with strikes. Facebook restricts our page. Reddit and Twitter take down posts. and after the Associated Press mentioned geopolitics and empire in a 2021 article co-written with NATO, our Patreon account was terminated. Vimeo also terminated our Pro account. The best free way to help Geopolitics and Empire is to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or elsewhere and subscribe to all of our media channels. You can find the video broadcast now on 5 platforms: Odyssey, Rockfin, Rumble, BitChute, and Brighteon. You can find the audio broadcast on the podcast ecosystem: SoundCloud, Apple, Spotify, and so on. My current favorite social media channels are Twitter and Telegram, but you can also find us on Gab, MeWe, Minds, Float, VK, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Finally, Geopolitics and Empire is in dire need of funding to continue. You can leave a donation, purchase a consultation with the host, or become a member to receive additional benefits. We also produce a weekly broadcast called Dissident Thinker for members and Rockfin subscribers only. We will continue to fight the good fight come hell or high water. Thank you for listening.